Hi, I'm Greg Hewlin with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today I get to sit down and talk with John Carpenter, who's the general manager at Joe Ball GMC just outside of Pittsburgh. Really looking forward to the conversation. He's got an interesting backstory and is doing some great things at that store. So, John, thanks so much for joining.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. John, I'm hoping to start with maybe a little bit of your background. I think you have a pretty interesting story and a path. You know, we all end up in automotive in one way or the other, and then it seems like once we're in, we never leave because it's too much fun, right? But you end up going, you know, everybody's got their own path and their own direction. So share yours a little bit because I do think it's a little unique and kind of a fun story.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. I started in the car business in 1990 selling cars, and I moved up through the business in 2005. I'm on my 33rd year, and I guess in 2005, I had a dealership at the time. We sold that dealership, and when I sold it, I wasn't one of those people, Greg, that didn't like retail, so I decided to jump out. I always liked retail, right? But when I sold that store, my wife and I kind of stepped back and thought about what my next career move might be. And Reynolds got on the radar, and that all happened fairly quickly. I joined Reynolds in 2005, and I worked in the consulting group from 2005 to 2016. And for the last 4 years, I was running the Midwest region and Canada for the consulting group as a consulting manager. So yeah, it is kind of unique, right? And when I left Reynolds, I left on really good terms. Some retail opportunities presented themselves again here in Pittsburgh, and I took those, but we left on really good terms. And it's been interesting, right? Because I've been able to take what I learned in retail. I was obviously able to help leverage that knowledge in Reynolds. But when I came back to retail, Greg, what I learned in Reynolds really gave me what I believe to be a unique set of skills in that I knew how things work from the vendor side, the partner side, and the retail side. And I think it's really been able to help us kind of navigate the technology shifts that we've had over the past 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, it's almost just like having that different perspective and that different lens to look at things through helps you slow down a little bit, helps you, to use your word, kind of navigate things a little differently and hopefully more effectively. But it is interesting when you take a step out of what you've done for so long and you're doing something similar, but from a different angle, or you have a different perspective. It's really interesting coming back, and just the way that you see things and the way that you view things and the way you do things can be so different. I mean, you're doing the same things, but probably in a different way and hopefully a more effective way.
Yeah, I think so. I think you said something very, very key there. It helps us. I think it's helped me step back and kind of visualize the matrix, and which sometimes it looks kind of convoluted, right? But having spent the time that I spent with Reynolds, I think it's helped me kind of bring form to that matrix and visualize things that I might not have been able to visualize had I not spent my time with you.
Yeah. So maybe we can start there, John, and because, obviously for a lot of us, we're not in a position where we're going to, leave our job in retail to go work somewhere else to get a different perspective, or vice versa. Sure. But can you think of any ways, or maybe ways that you have in the past or even today, slow down and take that step back without, maybe leaving your current role? So say I'm a GM at a store, or I'm, a general sales manager at a store, and it's not like I want to leave and go work for a vendor or work for an OEM. Sure. But how can I slow down and just make sure that I'm embracing all the different perspectives and looking at situations as clearly as I can?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that I learned in the consulting group, Greg, and one of the things that I relate to the dealerships that I was consulting at the time, was when you're in a position at a dealership where you need to make decisions, I think oftentimes we get so close to the forest here that it's difficult to see the trees. And I think one of the most important things, one of the suggestions that I think are important, are to reserve time for yourself. Build it into your day, even put it on your schedule if you have to to kind of step away from the business and look at it from a 20,000-foot view, right? Because again, we get so close to it, we get so caught up in doing things that we don't leave ourselves the appropriate amount of time for assessment, right? And I think that's probably the best way that I've found over the years to kind of navigate that, is to make sure that I leave time for reserve time for myself to assess processes, to assess our state of business, to assess our desired direction for our business during the coming months and the next few months. And just reserving that sounds really simple, but it's really hard to do unless you kind of take a concerted point to reserve that time for yourself. Very important.
Yeah, you're right. When have you found it, and this is probably for every individual a little bit different, but when have you found it most effective? Is it kind of a morning exercise, lunchtime, evening? I think about myself and time in the car, windshield time is always good for me to do that. Honestly, out for a longer run is a really good time for me to do that. It kind of clears the head and you just start thinking about stuff. Or early morning before the day really starts, right? Before you get into the groove and you start getting after it. But for you, what have you found to be the most effective time or times to do that?
For me, I like to do it in the morning. I feel like I'm fresh in the morning. I feel like once I'm here for 8 or 12 hours a day, I don't do things like I did 8 hours ago, right? I'm not fresh. I'm not invigorated. So I like to have those, I like to set that time for myself in the morning. So I really have the business hasn't really gotten moving yet. I have some time to assess, and then I jump in and I have some direction. That windshield time's great, though, too.
Yeah. Good. Well, no, I appreciate that and going down there. One of the other things I wanted to get into with you, John, on is the idea of I've been rolling this around in my head a lot, and the idea of the human touch and how it used to be such a core part of our industry, of our business, right? That human to human relationship, but that dynamic has changed. We've allowed it to change through technology and through expectations and. I want to talk some about your perspective on that human interaction, that relationship that we build with the customer, and what that means, how it's changed, how it's important. We can kind of start wherever you want, but I'm interested in your perspective.
Yeah, no, I think obviously over the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen some really dramatic shifts, right? And I think it became a situation, Greg, where things maybe got a little too sterile, right? We got so inundated in the technology pieces that we moved away. And I say we as an industry, and I certainly include myself in that, we got so caught up in the technology that I think that human interaction with the customer that's so necessary and that we know that they want kind of got muddled through all that. And I think what we're finding now is that while the technology becomes more and more important in our lives and in our industry, that human touch is still an integral part of what we need to do, right? So I feel like as an industry, we're now learning to connect all those dots and maintain relationships, build relationships, have that human interaction while using the technology to enhance it, right? I think we almost got caught in technology replacing those relationships and replacing that human interaction, where all this technology should be enhancing all those things that we know that we need to do to be successful, right? So I think now our industry is kind of in a phase where we're recognizing that, Greg, and we're starting to connect all those dots to really, really utilize all the tools that we have available to us to interact with our customer at a better level.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that, and you said something, that was interesting. Well, a lot of it's interesting, but something that stood out to me was, the idea of technology replacing a person. And it seems like that's always the initial kind of big leap, right? You have on one end, if you look at it on kind of a spectrum, right? On one end of the spectrum, you have what we do today, right? And in this case, it's talking with people, interacting with people. The salesperson has all the information, and that relationship and that conversation really is the centerpiece of the transaction. And then all of a sudden, technology advances to the point where, we say, well, shoot, we can just give the customer all that information and they don't even really need to talk to a person, and they can interact and transact online, and it's really not a big deal. And so you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And then we start to realize the deficiencies, right? And we start to realize the gaps. And so then we start to scale it back a little bit. I agree with you. I think we're on that path of scaling back to the point where it's a blended model. But we're also to the point, I feel like, and I want to bounce this off you. I'm trying to ask this like a question, doing a pretty poor job, but the thought that's going through my head is I feel like in today's world, that conversation, that human interaction is almost the novelty versus, you go back 10 years ago and the technology was the novelty, right? So everybody was drawn to it. It's flashy. And it was a differentiator. It really was, where you have this technological interaction versus a human interaction. In today's world, we're so tech heavy in so many parts of our lives that when you get the opportunity to interact with somebody and have a relationship with somebody, that feels really good. And that's almost like the surprise and the novelty and the really value add.
Right. No, I think you're on the money. I think we have learned that relationship building is what is the lifeblood of our business, right? And for a small store like us, quite frankly, we don't have the budgets to go out and buy more customers every time we need them, right? So we really need to work on ways to engage with our customers creatively. We know the customers are reaching out to us through any number of ways. And so we have a desire to talk, the customer's showing a desire to talk, and we're all trying to find the best way to kind of put those two things together, because we know that customers don't always walk on our lot at the same rate that they used to, right? So we know that there's a desire on both sides to engage. And again, I think both the customer and we are trying to find the best way to engage at a level that has the best impact for both of us, right? Both the customer and ourselves. So it's been an interesting, like I said, it's been an interesting 5 years in that we're starting to realize that the technology isn't replacing those relationships, but rather now we're trying to figure out how to use that technology to maximize those relationships, build the relationships, and, have the point of sale navigate to the point of resale. So that now you're customer building, right? Yeah. And that's really how I see this moving forward. Is I think the dealers that are going to win through these next X amount of years are going to be the dealers that find the best way to connect all those dots. And boy, if it was easy, we'd all be able to do it, right? And again, you would think it's easy because we know both sides have the desire to talk and the desire to communicate, but we believe we're on the right path, and I think the industry's on the right path.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, too, that's where the dealership adds value in this whole ecosystem, right? It used to be, going back 20, 25 years, that the dealership added value by, having the vehicle in inventory and having all the information on the vehicle, and the salesperson could guide the customer to the right vehicle. In today's world, all that information is kind of out there, and you can touch and feel and drive a car in a lot of different places. So that value, I think there's a ton of value in the relationship, and you think about, I don't know, there's an interesting concept I've heard talked about around digital natives versus analog natives. So you and I, we grew up in a world that didn't have Facebook and cell phones, right? So right. We consider us analog natives, but anybody under, 35, certainly 30, would be kind of a digital native, meaning they don't know a world where they didn't have a life online. Right, they've had a cell phone in their hand their entire lives. They've had a Facebook account their entire lives. So they've built a life online, right, in a digital format, and then their their analog life, or their what we would call real life, right, is almost supplemental, and it enhances their digital life. And it's a complete flip to what we've been so used to forever. And it's interesting when you think about that, and then how that's going to expand into the future, where we really have an opportunity to create something meaningful and connect on a different level because of that, the rareness of that interaction.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, as you were speaking, I was thinking in my mind, Greg, I think sometimes as an industry, we forget that we are helping the customer navigate to one of the most emotional decisions that they ever make, right? I mean, people don't become attached to many more things other than their home, right? A home purchase is emotional, and an automotive purchase is emotional. And again, tapping into that emotion and tapping into that engagement level that allows the customer to engage at that emotional level, it is a little more difficult today. But I think, again, that we're finding a way to connect those dots and tap into that emotion again, where, you're right. I think a few years ago, we kind of moved away from that a little bit, and we were kind of missing that mark. But I think we're moving back to that, and I think customers are realizing that, and I think this is exhibited by some of the models that we've seen around us that have become, moved to that far side that maybe they don't have that emotional attachment. I think the dealership has given us. I think the new model has given us the opportunity to kind of have that hybrid conversation with the customer, allow them their kind of shopping exercise that they choose, right, or that they want, but still have that relationship that they want to have through the ownership experience, right? Because what we found is, you navigate to that sale, but that's just the scratching the surface of that relationship, right? It's really navigating that next 2 to 3, 5 years, that buying cycle for that customer. It's really navigating that is the part that we really need to become focused on and do successfully in order to build the business, right? So, and we believe, again, that the technology is helping us do that. But that is something that we see as critical in building our business, navigating that sale to the point of resale, that 2 to 3 year buying cycle. So, of course, we want the immediate sale, but we really need more support now than ever to maintain that relationship with the customer through their buying cycle and through their ownership experience.
Yeah. So what do you focus on to do that? I mean, are we talking about, when you talk about that as the ownership experience, I immediately go to service, right? So we want to maintain their vehicle. We want to maintain that relationship over the coming years through service. Are there other ways that you stay connected and manage that relationship? And I like your phrase of, managing the relationship from sale to resale. That's a really good phrase. But what other pieces are you referring to, or maybe just go into a little detail on that?
Yeah. So, obviously, I service kind of does their part in maintaining a great relationship, right? But from the sales side, we work really hard with our technology. In our case, it happens to be contact management, which is our CRM. That happens to be a Reynolds product, as you know. And I believe we could always improve, but I believe we do that fairly well, Greg. We work none of us have a good enough memory to remember every customer we sold and every single piece of information that we need to maintain that relationship. But through good exercising of CRM, I believe that we maintain that relationship pretty well with customers, just to get the reminders for us, right? So maybe it's a happy birthday. Maybe it's just a call a year from now to talk to the customer and see how everybody's doing, to remember things like names, Greg. I'm great with faces. I'm terrible with names, right? So one of the things I do is I make sure when I go into the CRM and I deal with the customer, I make sure I capture the entire family's name and who they are, right? So I know the kids' names. I know the husband or wife's name. And when I talk to that customer the next time, I pull up their file and I can have a conversation. And when I look at all that, then I remember, right? Then I'm putting the faces to those names, and it's building a relationship for me, but more importantly, it's building a relationship for them. They now know somebody here and feel like they have a deeper relationship, and this is what we all want, right? So I think CRM has helped us in a lot of ways. Contact management has helped us in a lot of ways, and I think our chat tool has been good for us from that perspective. We all know that we're in kind of an immediate reciprocation world, right? People want what they want when they want it, whether that's a vehicle or whether that's just a conversation, right? So what we found, and we learned this the hard way over the last year, is, that chat piece is really critical in today's environment because people see what they see and they want to act on it right now, whether that action is just a question or a purchase, whatever their desired action is, they want to take that step now. And chat's been really critical for us to kind of maintain that conversation with the customer, whether it's a recurrent repeat customer or whether it's an initial point of interest for a vehicle, right? So chat's been a really critical piece for us on that.
What role do you think artificial intelligence plays, especially in the chat world, right? You have your chat bots, and then you have your agents, and you have your salespeople. Is there a role? Obviously, it's growing. Technology is advancing to the point where the interactions are much more human-like. But what role do you see kind of technology and artificial intelligence playing in that chat space?
Well, I think that we are all kind of running on a skeleton environment from a dealership perspective, right? I think it's safe to say that post-COVID, Greg, we are not overstaffed. We have lean staffing. We've worked really hard, I think, as an industry to become efficient through these past 3 years that we've dealt with some of the pandemic issues. So I think the chat piece and the artificial intelligence piece is really important because, quite frankly, I don't sit in my office and not talk to customers. I'm on the front lines most of the day, right?
Right.
And if I'm talking with a customer that's here, they are the most important thing to me. So whatever happens in the chat or web environment happens either way, whether I'm with a customer or not, right? So, but it doesn't make that customer less important that's on the chat. Even though I'm going to pay more attention than the person that's here, what I've found is that AI chat technology has helped us in this small environment navigate that conversation with the customer until the point that I'm able to engage again, right? So I think it's been again, I think initially maybe we looked at virtual BDCs and things like that, right? And I think what we're finding now is that, again, we kind of want that blended model. Maybe we don't want a virtual BDC, but we want something to just keep the conversation going. We want a quality engagement with the customer to navigate the time until we're able to be freed up and engage the customer personally again, right? And what we found through that is oftentimes if it's a good technology, if it's a good AI interface, those good AI interfaces are getting to the point where sometimes they have the desired outcome for the customer on their own without our engagement. Yeah. And kind of the interesting thing that I learned with Goo was, I'm kind of a hands-on person, right? I like to jump in. And when I saw that customer conversation happening with Goo, I was on that dashboard, and I saw that conversation happen, and I jumped right in. And what I learned, Greg, is I need to back off and let nature take its course on that because I got a little too excited, I think. And what I found is I'm having better results letting that natural AI conversation happen and then engaging with the customer after the fact rather than stopping it, jumping in. So, but that all kind of pivots off of a good framework of AI technology. I told you we learned the hard way earlier. I mentioned it with chat. We had a chat tool in here that historically had done a nice job for it, but I think I think over the past year they've been surpassed. And what we found is that the AI technology was causing the customer to kind of move away from the conversation. I think the customer was realizing quickly, Greg, this is not real, right? This is not what I want to have happen. And they were just kind of hanging up the phone. They were just kind of going away on us. And when we moved towards Goobagoo, we saw that engagement happen again in a much more natural way. And again, what I found with that is I'm better off to let that conversation happen, let the technology happen, and then jump in after the fact. But it's been an interesting evolution seeing the differences of an AI platform that probably got passed up a little bit over the past few years to a new, fresh AI platform that really seems to be having a natural conversation with the customer. That's been really interesting for us. And I guess how I would frame that is the previous conversation just wasn't the right conversation for our customer. And if it's not the right thing for our customer, then it's not the right thing for me. And when we move to Goobagoo in this case, and we have a much better interaction level, that's the right thing for me. I want my customers to have the best possible experience at Joe Ball GMC, whether it's dealing with me, one of our service technicians, or a salespeople, or the chat tool. People need quality interaction right now, and quite frankly, we don't have the time to not have a quality interaction with our customers.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. There's a couple things there that I want to dig into a little bit. So the first one, talking about chat and good versus bad AI. I do think, and I'm curious what your reaction is, that there's an opportunity to be upfront with customers that, hey, I'm a chat bot, right? Like set the expectation too, so they're not. When that conversation does go a little bit off the rails, it's not awkward and they don't get upset. It's like, hey, if you want to talk to somebody at any time, just tell me and I'll get somebody on, in the chat. So having that balance, and people are at this point understanding of the fact that, hey, there's a chat bot that's going to answer some basic questions. And if I want to have a conversation, I can talk to a person. So, there's that piece of it. The other one, though, on the flip side of that is how advanced kind of artificial intelligence is getting. Have you seen any of the chat GPT stuff that kind of came out in November? They launched. Have you seen any of that?
I don't know if I've seen that.
Okay.
What was the acronym you used?
It's Chat GPT, and I don't know what GPT stands for, to be quite honest with you. I'm not an expert on this, but it came to my attention. So Ryan Reynolds, the actor who's got a few different companies, he's got a company called Mint Mobile, and he actually did an ad, and he claims, and I mean I don't have a reason to not believe it, but he claims he used Chat GPT to write a script for a commercial. And so he put this commercial out, and it's pretty funny, as most of his stuff is, but he reads the script that ChatGPT wrote for him, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's nice. It flows well. It's in his voice, and at the end, he's like, "Man, that's kind of terrifying how good that is." So you look at some of this stuff and the different ways people are leveraging technology and making it more and more human. It'll be very interesting over the next handful of years to see how far this goes. And again, to circle back around on what we were talking about earlier, I think it makes the desire for actual human interaction that much stronger, because when you're interacting with a screen or your phone the whole time, sitting down and talking to somebody face to face, belly to belly, it just feels different.
It does, and I think when the customer is ready for it, they've discovered over the past 5 years that that's what they want, right? But in that initial kind of phase where AI is playing a part, the customers they're maybe dipping their toes in the water, right? They're not ready to just jump in yet. So, but they want good information. They want quality information. They want transparency. They need they need to accomplish what they need to accomplish before they get here, right? And then when they get here, what I've found, Greg, is if we're able to give them quality interactions up front in that way, when they get here, what was so hard for us 20 years ago has become easy because they already know what they want. They already know or have a very good idea of what it costs. They're a much more informed customer, and they're much easier to I guess process that transaction with because they're educated. They know that fear that they've had, right? So you have a salesperson that's kind of afraid of the customer, and you have a customer that's kind of afraid of us. A lot of that has been broken down in a very natural way because they've been able to overcome that with the information that they're able to get transparently. If they have a quality way to get that, they're able to overcome that before they get here. So that transaction has become much, much easier by the time that they hit our floor. But we've had to make adjustments, right? So think about the disconnects that can happen there, Greg. So we have a quality interaction on chat. We have a few emails back and forth. We build a little bit of a relationship, and then they come to the store and they run into a salesperson that says, what can I help you with? And we're not, maybe I'm not informed or not educated on the conversation and the hard work that they've done before they got here, right? So the good thing is the customer's educated. The piece that we need to live up to is we need to make sure that we meet the high expectations of information that the customer now has. They don't want to start from zero again, right? So they feel like they've accomplished 60% of what they do. We can't knock that back. We've got to take that 60% that they feel like they've accomplished and build on that, right? And that's where I found in the consulting group, right? And still today, I found that that's where our good work is making sure that we give the customers what they want and that we live up to their expectations when they get here. And again, that sounds very remedial, but all you have to do as a dealer is listen to a few phone calls, look at a few email chains to discover that maybe you're not where you want to be yet, and you find your areas of improvement, right? So that's really what we work hard on to do is to kind of navigate that difference between making sure we capitalize on what the customer's accomplished and we deliver on what their expectation now is, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that's where technology really can help, right? We talked about technology earlier, and there's a huge benefit there. So you think about, I've sold, you sold, and we've all worked in a CRM. Obviously, you push your salespeople to work in the CRM. You mentioned that earlier. But at the end of the day, we're all relying on ourselves and also others to input notes and to know what's going on. And if that doesn't happen, we've all done it, right? The customer sits down in front of you or calls you, and you're just scrambling trying to figure out who this person is, what the relationship with the store is, and if there's nothing or minimal information in the CRM, you're forced into a situation as a salesperson where you do have to ask those questions. So when we have more of the interaction happening online, it's digital by nature, so we can pull that in. So in that instance, when the customer is in front of us, we have it all. We know what the chat conversation was. We even know what the phone conversation was. We know what they've done. So that information is presented to us rather than relying on ourselves or our peers to manually input information that we all forget to. It's not an excuse, but the reality is sometimes we're busy and we don't get there,
Right. Well, from a CRM perspective, I think, we get so caught up in doing our work plans, right? We have to do our work, and we forget the work that we're doing. And what I mean by that is, and I would suggest this to any dealer, is that what I do is I'll go into the CRM and I'll look at our output for the day, right? So I might look at a salesperson's or anybody's outgoing emails for the day, not to necessarily look through, I'll spot check what they're sending. But one of the things I look for is, when did they do their work? Meaning, if I see that somebody sent 45 emails before 11 a.m., I know that we probably didn't pay attention to those emails with the level of customization that our customers might expect. If I see that they did 11 phone calls before 10 a.m., right? So phone call activities, that doesn't necessarily mean we had 11 conversations, right? So one of the things that we work hard to try to, we need to get those daily. We need to do our work. We need to execute what we need to execute, but we need to execute with quality output, meaning I would rather us make 5 good phone conversation, 5 real contacts than 20 completed activities, if that makes sense. And that's where I think, again, we can get what I think, again, in the past, we've gotten that technology kind of got us away from that. We're doing activities, we're doing all these activities. Look how many activities but how many real contacts did we have? How many real meaningful conversations with customers did we have, right? And that's really where we can make the CRM do what I believe it was intended to do, right? But I think sometimes we get away from that. Even today, we get so caught up in the doing that we miss the most important pieces of what we're here to do.
No, I love that. And I think at its core, a lot of that goes back to, and this is a mindset thing from the top down, a lot of that goes back to the leader, right? Whoever's inspecting the work. Are you inspecting activity, right? Or are you inspecting activity that drives output, right? And making the CRM a true sales tool versus a management tool. Those are two very different things, and both are important, but for the salesperson, the CRM should make their job easier. It should make them more effective, and it should help them close more business at the end of the day. So focusing on that part of it, much heavier than the part about trying to pull reports on, how many activities, to use your example, somebody has throughout the day. I think that is something that can get overlooked and can be a miss because we use it too often, I feel, as a measuring tool and a stick versus, something that is enabling and helping salespeople be more effective.
Yeah. Well, I think the technology excites us, Greg. And what I mean by that is, initially when I engaged with CRM years and years ago, which happened to be contact management in its infancy, by the way. But I think our natural reaction to that kind of introductory technology is we want it all, right? We want to do to call them till they buy or die, right? And to give the employees 30 phone calls and call them for 90 months. And what I found through Reynolds and through my own retail experience is that good-natured excitement inundates people with activity versus contact. And that's where we get so concerned, and I include myself in this at times, we get so concerned with how much work did we do as opposed to how much quality contact did we really have, right? And just those little things like looking for all the phone calls that sometimes the salesperson makes before 10 a.m. when maybe they didn't make all those calls before 10 a.m. And that's where those little tricks can kind of help you determine which atmosphere you're in from a CRM perspective. Are you in kind of an activity atmosphere where you're not necessarily focused on quality contact? You're just, we're getting the daily work plans done though, boss, right? Versus that quality conversation. And there's so many, Greg, we could talk about that all day, right? There's so many layers to that. Like if I'm going to ask them to make that quality conversation, then I need to make sure that they know how to have it and what they should say and what notes they should be looking for to prepare themselves to make that outgoing call, right? I get an incoming phone call from a customer. I don't know what's going to happen, right? I don't know what they're going to say on the other end of the line. But when I see that phone activity on my daily work plan, that gives me a unique opportunity to prepare myself and know as much as I can before I make that outgoing phone call, so that I have as much information as I can to increase my chances of having a positive outcome, whatever that positive outcome is, even if it's just checking in to see how the family's doing and knowing them by names instead of, oh, yeah, what's your kid's name again? Right? And it's a big difference. But it's quality in, quality out, garbage in, garbage out. But it's having those two different, I think having those two different mindsets, first determining which mindset you are as a store, and then doing what you need to do to maybe effectively change that mindset to quality contact versus just busy work, right?
Yep. No, that's great. Now, John, I could talk to you for hours or days probably, but I want to be respectful of your time. But before we hop off, there's one thing I wanted to ask you. So earlier you mentioned, and you kind of brought it up again, struggling to remember names at times, right? Really good with faces, not really good with names. One thing I've noticed throughout our conversation, you've used my name as we've been talking, just in conversation. But when you do that, obviously you're looking at me, you're saying my name. So the question I have is that intentional? Or is it something that maybe you've worked on in the past so that it could help you remember people's names? One of those little tricks that can be really impactful for folks, because I think that's fairly common where it's difficult. You meet so many people in a day, it's difficult to remember names. So,
it is intentional, Greg. I know my weakness on that front, and I had I forget who it was, but at one point I had a Suzuki franchise. Yep. And one of the presidents or vice presidents came in to visit me, and this is years ago. This is in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s. But he introduced himself, and he gave me his business card, and I took his business card, Greg, and I put it in my pocket. And he said, no. That's not how we do it. When you get a business card, you get the business card, you look at it, you learn the name, learn the title, acknowledge it, and then you put it in, right? And that's a lesson that has helped me kind of navigate my weakness in learning the names. Is I try to use names. When people give me business cards, I look at it, I acknowledge it. It helps me save it for when I need it, instead of just throwing it on my desk and it gets legs and goes away. Those little personal interactions. Like I said, I'm not real good at names, so I've learned a couple of different ways to help me kind of figure that out and make my memory a little better.
No, that's great. That's great. I appreciate you sharing. Well, John, what else you want to touch on? Anything we haven't talked about that we should, or anything you want to dive into before we hop off of here?
I guess the only thing I would say that I would add to the conversation that we've had, and it's been a good conversation, Greg. I appreciate that. I had good time with Reynolds. We have Reynolds today. There are many, many names in the hat right now to court as business partners and vendors, right? The manufacturers they put names in our hat. There's a lot for dealers to look at today, with all the technology that's happening around them. But the one thing I would leave you with, I guess, is I believe that it's really important that dealers understand the difference between a business partner and a vendor. And that when they move towards things like DMS systems, major things, right? We know we have to deal with vendors, and there's nothing wrong with vendors. But when we look towards major pieces like CRMs, like DMSs, it's very important that I believe dealers need to look at the difference between a business partner and a vendor. And I know that since I've been back in the retail, I've had to look at other vendors. Selfishly, I built my career on Reynolds, so I know it like the back of my hand. But there are other choices out there that we've looked at. But it has been what I view as our partnership that has kind of been the trump card in those conversations that the other vendors have not been able to overcome. The level of service that we get, and if I may throw a few names, the level of service that we get from people like Dave Brown, from people like Matt Kleeman, from people like Scott Worthington, who I've known for years, people like Dave Bates and your new president, Chris Walsh. They're just outstanding people, and they've created a very good relationship for us. And as I said, we've been able to have a level of interaction with your company just over the past year. And it wasn't bad before that either. But we've really deepened our ties over the past year. And I can tell you that I appreciate that as a dealership, to have a business partner that I believe has our best interest at heart.
Well, John, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for sharing. Not necessary at all, but I'll tell you, it is appreciated. We appreciate your partnership as well. It's always a two-way street, right? And thanks for all that you do as well. But John Carpenter, General Manager at Joe Ball GMC, thanks again for all your time this morning, and we'll catch up again soon, hopefully.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great conversation with John Carpenter from Joe Ball GMC outside of Pittsburgh. A wealth of knowledge there. I appreciate him hopping on. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcasts. And make sure to subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.